Hi, this is Remembering the Past, the show where we talk about people who've died recently who've had a profound effect on our history, our society, or our culture. We're going to let our feature subject introduce himself tonight.
I'm Morley Safer.
Our feature subject tonight is Morley Safer, who died recently at the age of 84. He was a nice Jewish boy born in Toronto who went to the University of Western Ontario, same place my dad went to medical school, and he became one of the top journalists of the second half of the 20th century. Best known for being one of the hosts of 60 Minutes, although his most important contribution to journalism may be as a war correspondent in Vietnam before he got the 60 Minutes gig. Here's the Associated Press on the death of Morley Safer.
It was just over a week ago CBS announced he was retiring. The network says veteran 60 Minutes reporter Morley Safer died Thursday.
The Russians are coming, or at least they want to.
A statement from 60 Minutes called Safer a master storyteller, a gentleman, and a wonderful friend.
Suppose you had a few dollars.
CBS chairman and CEO Les Moonves said Safer was a groundbreaking reporter whose name will always be linked to the news magazine. Over the years, Safer did 919 stories for 60 Minutes, which he joined in 1970, taking up the co-host chair alongside Mike Wallace. On Sunday, 60 Minutes aired a tribute to Safer after announcing his retirement May 11th. In his 40 years with 60 Minutes, Safer covered everything from his first story about U.S. sky marshals to a 1984 profile of Jackie Gleason to a theory that red wine can be good for your health. His final story, in March, profiled a Danish architect. Over his career, Safer won 3 Peabody Awards, 12 Emmys, and 2 George Polk Awards.
It happened less than 40 years ago.
Morley Safer was 84 years old. Laurie Neff, The Associated Press.
Since most people today know him from 60 Minutes, let's hear what he had to say about 60 Minutes and the 20-minute format that he was a master at.
Any reporter doing this kind of work will tell you that you felt imprisoned by the minute and a half or 2.5, even 3-minute pieces that you did routinely. 3 minutes was a big deal. Well, here's a chance for 20 minutes where you really get your teeth in a story, where you can really have a chance to do a little writing, a little thinking, a little working to such a sharp deadline. I think there was a hunger for more than what could be jammed into a 22 or 23 or whatever 28-minute broadcast as the news was then. There was a hunger for it. No one was doing it. There were the hour documentaries, which had a certain lugubrious quality about them. Many of them did. That maybe had more information than people could happily sit still for. There was something about 20 minutes or 18-minute pieces, which are now 12, that seemed to fit perfect. Also, I think one very important reason was the variety of story, that there wasn't this relentless one-note kind of whatever people call things, best national disgrace stories, that there really was a nice, interesting mix of story. And I think by the 3rd or 4th year of being on at 7 o'clock on Sunday, we became something like Life magazine was to our house when I was a kid. You expected it through the mailbox, the events of the week. I think that's what happened.
His favorite and perhaps most influential piece was in 1983.
There was no physical evidence of Jeter's guilt. No gun, no cash, no license plate taken down at the scene of a crime.
Is that the man who held up Kentucky Fried Chicken? Was that the man who held up the Kentucky Fried Chicken?
Yes, sir.
We broadcast our story, which was a clear miscarriage of justice. And within days, Manel Jeter was out of jail. Just about the most gratifying story that a reporter could possibly do. To make that kind of difference, in effect, to save a life, is pretty hot stuff.
But as I said, Safer's most important contribution to journalism may have been before he was in 60 Minutes, when he was a young correspondent for the CBS Evening News. In August of 1965, he traveled with a group of Marines to a village called Cam Knee, southwest of Da Nang, early in the Vietnam War. Here is the story of what happened and some of the aftermath.
It was my week up with the Marines, and I got there, and that afternoon I went around to various Marine command posts, and I went to one, and they said, well, we're going to an operation in the morning. Would you like to come? I said, sure. About halfway there, one of the officers said, well, we're going to punish this village. They've been harboring people. And then when we got into the village, they just systematically set about destroying it.
The Marines opened fire on the hamlet. They torched huts with cigarette lighters, but no enemy combatants were found.
All that night, the switchboard at CBS lights up with people who did not want to see what they saw, making obscene phone calls and telling CBS that it's run by a bunch of communists. One of the phone calls comes in the next morning at about 5 or 6 o'clock. Frank Stanton's at his home, and he hears this voice, this Texas voice saying,
"Frank, this is your president. Do you know what you did to me last night? You shat on the flag of the United States."
It was the first televised news report to portray the military in a negative light, and many viewers were not wholly prepared for the horror of those images. But the graphic nature of the report was more the exception than the rule.
The Marines claimed it was a VC stronghold. Safer got in a lot of trouble, both with Frank Stanton, the number 2 man at CBS, and with Lyndon Johnson, who wanted to find out if he was a communist. When he found out Safer was a Canadian, he said, well, it must be the same thing. But it was Safer's Camden reporting in August of '65 that set the tone for American reporting during the rest of the war. Here is Safer's rationalization.
I never heard anything like that. He said to take out this complex of villages. And I thought perhaps he's exaggerating. We got in, the troops walked across towards his village. Come this way, Frank. And started torching every house that I could see as far as I could see.
This is what the war in Vietnam is all about. The old and the very young. The Marines have burned this old couple's cottage because fire was coming from here.
The trooper with the flamethrower was ordered to zap a particular house, and Vietnamese cameraman put his camera down and said, "Don't do it, don't do it, don't do it." We could hear people crying. What's interesting to me about this idea that exists, that is still current in the U.S. military, is that somehow the press lost Vietnam. If you go back and look, it's a major chore, at the reportage coming from the main media sources, New York Times, Washington Post, Time, Newsweek, AP, UPI, CBS, NBC, you will find a preponderance of what a reasonable person would regard as positive story, whether it was in the treatment of civilians in terms of civil action, which we all covered, and I covered plenty of, by the Marines, going out, bringing in fresh, clean water, bringing in medical help, helping villagers. Some of it was done for purely PR reasons. Awful lot of it, most of it was done for straight humanitarian reasons. I constantly challenge whenever I deal these days with military who come after me over this in a fairly friendly way. Look at the balance of stories, not just from me, but from anybody who is out there on a open-ended assignment.
In closing, let me say there's a little bit of journalistic rationalization there. There's no doubt that the North Vietnamese used the American press to their advantage. And you have to remember that the American press did not get embedded with the North Vietnamese. So there's no question we were treated to indisputable American war transgressions. But we didn't get to see what the North Vietnamese and the Viet Cong did, even in Cam Knee. And for as good a reporter as Morley Safer was, that didn't seem to occur to him. We're going to move on now to Julian Meade, who died recently at the age of 90. She was an actress in the late 50s. She was in Pillow Talk, but she's best known for being a pitchman, or pitchwoman as it were, working with Ed Sullivan, selling late model Fords. Here's a classic Julian Meade, Ed Sullivan pitch, and you get Ed Sullivan a little bit out of character. He actually ad-libs a little bit. These were very popular commercials in the late 50s.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, here's our lovely Julia Meade, who has become quite a little traveler since she got her new Lincoln. Where are you taking us tonight, dear Julia?
Back to California, Ed.
Well, okay, Julia, take us away.
We made some scenes on the famous Hollywood freeway to illustrate how Lincoln's new 285 horsepower engine combines with turbo drive automatic transmission to give you the instant power you need to go quickly into fast-moving traffic, and to provide you with that extra margin of safety in driving situations where you have to think and act without hesitation. At some time or another, no matter how careful we are, we find ourselves in awkward positions in traffic. And it is reassuring to know that Lincoln's power is there whenever you need it. Well, with our mountain shots and our freeway scenes, we had a full day's work. And yet that evening, I headed for the lovely Beverly Hills Hotel to meet some friends. For even after 9 hours of driving, I felt fresh and relaxed and proud. Proud because at this hotel, where you see the world's finest automobiles, my Lincoln drew the quiet admiration it so richly deserves.
Thank you, Julia. Now, the demand, of course, for new Lincolns still continues to be the greatest in Lincoln's 36-year history. So I'm going to tell you what Julia and I tell our friends. The best thing for you to do is get your order in now for your new Lincoln.
For Lincoln is unmistakably the finest.
Well, we're going to move on now to two athletes who were stalwarts of legendary teams. The first was Dick McAuliffe, who died recently at the age of 76. He was the shortstop on the 1968 Tigers, who upset the St. Louis Cardinals and won the World Series. We talked about them when we did the Jim Northrup podcast. Dick McAuliffe was a tough guy. He was known for holding his bat high above his head. Made the All-Star team a couple of times. Here he is hitting a home run in the 1965 All-Star game. That's Joe Garagiola announcing. We just did his podcast.
Not very tall, but he's a strong little guy, and in the Detroit ballpark, he's definitely a home run threat. Here's one well hit. Willie Mays is going back, way back near the warning track, and leaps and can't get it. Home run. There it is, a home run for Dick McAuliffe. Dick McAuliffe has just made this a 5-3 ball game.
And in the Tigers' magical season of 1968, they got in a late-season brawl with the White Sox, and Dick McAuliffe beat up on a young Tommy John. Here's the legendary Ernie Harwell.
1-0 Tigers lead. They got that run in the opening inning. Man who scored is up there now, waiting on a 3-2 pitch from John. Watch out! That one just about hit him, and I think Mac's a little perturbed. He's yelling out to Tommy John. Now he goes at him, and John tackles McAuliffe. Here comes Pete Ward in, Mickey Stanley. Severno's there in the middle, and both dugouts empty, and the teams are going at it. Gates Brown is out there, and now the umpires are trying to separate the combatants here, and I think the situation has been still. John, I believe, has hurt his arm.
Well, our other athlete was Jim McMillian, who died recently at the age of 68. He was the small forward who was drafted out of Columbia, took over for Elgin Baylor, and was on the Lakers' legendary 71-72 team that won 33 straight games and was the first Laker team to win a title in Los Angeles. Here's Chick Hearn.
Jimmy McMillian, it comes!
And Jimmy McMillian playing beautiful basketball right now.
Here Jim McMillian talks about that legendary 71-72 Laker team.
33-game win streak. We didn't appreciate it when we were doing it. You were so into the moment of winning, so you didn't think about the fact that it was streak. We were disappointed when we lost and it was broken, but I think the championship itself was a highlight of that year because you could have won 33 in a row and lose in the championship. And it's like, okay, the baggage, I didn't have any of that because it was just my second year. So I couldn't relate to all the losses that they had, especially against Boston. Now, I could relate to the one loss in the 69-70 season to the Knicks because I was a senior in college and I was drafted in the first round by the Lakers. And I grew up being a Knicks fan. So I'm at Madison Square Garden where they were playing the 7-game series. I'm having a conflict. Here's the team I've been rooting for ever since I moved to New York, playing against the team that I was drafted by. And I was telling my agent, I don't know who to root for. And he said, look, root for the one that's going to be signing the paycheck. And I said, okay, that makes it simple. And so I can relate to that loss when they lost in 7 games to the Knicks because I felt like I was a part of that, even though I was sitting in the stand, watching. But the other losses, I didn't feel that. Jerry West, Elgin, maybe Will, they all felt that, but they never voiced that feeling about it.
I'm going to close on that note. I want to thank my producer and IT genius at Teps. We're going to close with a combination tonight. We want to say goodbye to the Los Angeles Memorial Sports Arena, which is closing after 56 years. It hosted, among other things, the nominating convention of 1960 for John F. Kennedy, the 1968 and 1972 NCAA Finals, and it was a favorite arena for Bruce Springsteen, who played there often, as did Michael Jackson, Madonna, U2, Pink Floyd, and the Grateful Dead. And as a tribute to close, we're going to close with a song by Guy Clark, who died recently at the age of 74. He was a country music singer and writer. He wrote and sang the song LA Freeway. So we'll say goodbye to the Los Angeles Memorial Sports Arena and to Guy Clark.
Pack up all your dishes. Make note of all good wishes. Say goodbye to the landlord for me. Some bitches always bore me. Throw out them LA papers. Moldy bags of vanilla wafers. Adios to all this concrete. Gonna give me some dirt road back the street. I can just get off of this LA freeway.